Marcus Harris was 39 years old, made $61,000 a year changing oil and fixing dents, and believed, until this very moment, that his life was built on solid ground. At 11:18 p.m. on a Tuesday drenched in cold October rain, that belief evaporated. He sat in the dim light of the living room, the glow of his 5-year-old $400 Dell laptop illuminating his face. The house around him, a modest 2-bedroom bungalow on Charlotte's west side, was silent. Janelle was out. She was always out these days, usually in Ballantyne, a world of glass towers and expensive cocktails that felt a universe away from their quiet street. He had felt a knot of unease for weeks, a low hum of wrongness he couldn't quite name. It was in the way Janelle looked at him, her eyes skimming over his grease-stained work shirt with a flicker of something that looked like pity, or maybe disgust. It was in the hushed, urgent phone calls she took in the other room, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper when he walked by. Tonight, a stray email notification from the county court system, addressed to the home's primary resident, had turned that vague unease into a cold, sharp spike of dread. The subject line was clinical: notice of filing in case number 24-CVD-1889. He wasn't a party to any case. He'd never even had a speeding ticket. Curiosity warred with a deeper, primal fear. He clicked the link, navigated the clunky government portal, and entered the case number. The screen refreshed, and the world tilted on its axis. There, in stark black and white, was a motion for asset seizure. Plaintiff, Janelle Harris. The list of assets was chillingly specific. The house at 1412 Westmoreland Avenue, valued at $220,000. The 2021 Toyota 4Runner, valued at $50,000. The joint savings account at Truist Bank, holding $70,341, a grand total of $340,341. His breath caught in his throat. This was everything. This was the house his father had left him, the car his father's inheritance had paid for, the savings account seeded with the last of his father's money, which Marcus had painstakingly added to with every overtime shift he could get. He scanned the attached documents, his heart pounding a slow, heavy drum against his ribs. It was a sworn affidavit from Janelle, claiming sole financial contribution and ownership, stating that Marcus Harris had been a dependent, a financial burden whose name was on the accounts and deeds merely as a matter of convenience, not equity. And then he saw it, the detail that stopped the blood in his veins. On the official filing under the list of owners for the house, the car, and the bank account, there was only one name listed: Janelle Harris. His name was gone, erased, as if he had never existed, as if the last 15 years of his life, of his work, of his love, had been a fiction. In that moment, Marcus understood. This wasn't a separation. This was an erasure, and he had no idea just how deep the betrayal ran. He was just a mechanic, after all. What did he know about the law? What could he possibly do? He stared at the screen, the rain lashing against the window pane, and a terrifying calm washed over him. They thought he was a simple man. They were about to find out how wrong they were. Have you ever felt completely blindsided by someone you trusted with your entire life? Let us know in the comments below, and stick with us to see how a good man turns the tables when he's pushed too far. Their life, before the rot set in, had been a study in comfortable, working-class normalcy. The $220,000 bungalow on Westmoreland Avenue was small, but it was theirs, or so he thought. It had a small porch where they'd sit on summer evenings and a patch of yard where Marcus grew tomatoes that Janelle in the early days would praise effusively. Marcus, a black man with a quiet strength and hands calloused from years of honest labor, saw the house as a sanctuary. It was the house his father, a man who had built a life with his own 2 hands, had bought and paid for, a tangible piece of his legacy. Marcus's father, William Harris, had been the anchor of his life. A mechanic himself, he ran a small, respected shop, Harris Automotive, for 40 years. He was a man of foresight and quiet wisdom. When he passed away 3 years ago, he left Marcus not just his grief, but a carefully constructed trust. "Never let anyone make you feel small because you work with your hands, son," he told Marcus a month before he died. "There's more honor in a well-done brake job than in 1,000 empty promises." Marcus lived by that code. His days were spent at a large collision center near the airport, a job that paid him a steady $61,000 a year. He wore his $45 Red Wing work boots until the soles were smooth, and his Carhartt jackets until the elbows were frayed. His greatest luxury was the 2021 Toyota 4Runner, a $50,000 vehicle that he'd bought outright with money from his father's trust. He maintained it with a mechanic's precision, changing the synthetic oil every 5,000 miles himself, rotating the tires, keeping the deep gray paint waxed and polished. It was his pride not because of its value, but because it was a product of his father's hard work. Janelle had once appreciated his steadiness. When they met, she was a receptionist making $35,000 a year. Drawn to his calm demeanor and the security he represented. She loved the bungalow then. She'd helped him pick out the $800 sofa from Rooms to Go and the $600 dining set. They'd spent weekends painting the living room a warm tan, their laughter echoing in the small space. He'd cook for her. Simple, hearty meals of roasted chicken and vegetables, the ingredients costing no more than $30 from the local grocery store. But Charlotte was a city of seductive ambition, and Janelle had been seduced. Her new job as an executive assistant at a private equity firm in Ballantyne changed everything. Suddenly, she was surrounded by women in $2,400 Burberry dresses and men who drove $90,000 Teslas. Her own salary had jumped to $75,000, but her tastes had escalated exponentially. Her side of the closet began to fill with designer labels. A $600 Tory Burch handbag appeared one week, followed by a pair of $750 Christian Louboutin shoes the next. She started talking about their bungalow with disdain. "It's so small, Marcus. My boss lives in a 4,000 square foot home in Myers Park. We should be thinking bigger." Their evenings shifted. Marcus would come home, his deep brown skin smudged with the day's grime, smelling of solvent and steel, and find her dressed for a night out. "My team is getting drinks at the punch room," she'd say, checking her reflection. "It's important for networking." He would nod, hiding the sting of being left behind, and eat his simple dinner alone. The $30 home-cooked meals were replaced by her solo tabs at upscale restaurants, often exceeding $150 for a single dinner. The contrast was stark. His life was grounded in the tangible reality of his $89 Timex watch and the satisfaction of a perfectly repaired fender. Hers was becoming an aspirational performance, funded by a credit card he suspected was carrying a rapidly growing balance. The $70,341 in their savings account, the money he saw as their future, their safety net, she now referred to as just sitting there. She had no idea it wasn't just sitting there, it was waiting, protected by a wisdom she could never comprehend. The cruelty began not as a storm, but as a series of small, cutting remarks, each one designed to chip away at his worth. It was a campaign of 1,000 paper cuts, and Janelle's brother, Kevin, was the one handing her the blades. Kevin was a junior analyst at a brokerage firm, a man who wore his ambition like a cheap, oversized suit. He carried a $1,200 Tissot watch on his wrist and spoke in a jargon-filled patois that was meant to sound impressive, but mostly just sounded rehearsed. He saw Marcus not as a brother-in-law, but as a failed investment, a drag on his sister's portfolio. The first major scene happened on a Sunday afternoon. Marcus was in the driveway, meticulously cleaning the fuel injectors on the 4Runner. It was a task he enjoyed, the precise work calming his mind. Janelle and Kevin pulled up in Kevin's leased BMW 3 Series, a $43,000 car he drove like it was a Bugatti. They got out, and Kevin surveyed the scene with a smirk. "Still playing with your toys, Marcus?" Kevin asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag. "Just doing some preventative maintenance." Right, Kevin said, sharing a look with Janelle. "Listen, Janelle and I were just running some numbers. We were talking about your financial picture here." Marcus felt a familiar tension creep up his spine. "Our financial picture is fine, Kevin." Janelle stepped forward, avoiding his eyes. "What he means, Marcus, is that we're not growing. My salary has nearly doubled, and we're still living in this starter home. We're sitting on all this equity, plus the cash in the savings account. Kevin says we could leverage it." "Leverage it for what?" Marcus asked, his voice flat. "For an investment property," Kevin jumped in. "A condo in South End. The rental income alone would be passive cash flow. You have to make your money work for you. You can't just let it sit there while you're out here getting your hands dirty for 60 grand a year." The insult was clear. Marcus's work was dirty, his income insignificant. "My 60 grand a year helped pay for this roof over your sister's head," Marcus said, his voice quiet but firm. "And the money in that account came from my father. It's not for gambling on a condo." Janelle's face hardened. "It's not gambling, Marcus, it's investing. You just don't understand? You think so small? You're a mechanic. You think about fixing things that are broken? I'm trying to build something." She gestured around the modest yard. "This isn't building something. This is settling." The conversation ended there, but the battle line had been drawn. A few weeks later, the cruelty escalated. Marcus came home from an exhausting 10-hour shift, looking forward to a quiet evening. He found Janelle in the living room, on the phone, her back to him. He heard her laugh, a sharp, dismissive sound that made the hairs on his arms stand up. "No, he's not here," she said into her phone, presumably to Kevin. "Probably still under some car, covered in grease. It's embarrassing, honestly. The other day, one of the partners at my firm asked what my husband does. I just said he's in the automotive industry. I couldn't bring myself to say he's a mechanic. It sounds so blue-collar." Marcus stood frozen in the hallway, the bag of takeout he'd bought for them, a $28 order of their favorite Thai food, suddenly feeling impossibly heavy in his hand. He backed away silently, his heart a cold, hard stone in his chest. He went out the back door and sat on the steps, the food growing cold on his lap. She wasn't just ashamed of his job, she was ashamed of him. The final, most devastating blow came about a month before he discovered the court filing. They were having one of their increasingly rare dinners together at home. Janelle had been distant all evening, texting furiously on her $1,100 iPhone. Finally, she put the phone down and looked at him, her expression one of calculated resolve. "Marcus, we need to talk about the assets," she said, using the cold, clinical term Kevin favored. "What about them?" "My name is on the deed to this house, and the title to the 4Runner, and the savings account," she began, laying out her argument as if she'd rehearsed it. "Legally, that implies a 50% ownership stake, but my contributions, especially lately, have far exceeded yours. My salary is higher. My career has more upward mobility." Marcus stared at her, baffled. "Janelle, the house and the car were paid for. They were paid for by my father. The savings account was started with his money. My name is on them because they belong to my family's trust." She let out a short, humorless laugh. "Oh, Marcus, that's sweet. But that's not how the real world works. Possession is 9/10 of the law. Your father is gone. His trust is just a piece of paper. The house is in Charlotte. The car is registered in North Carolina. The bank is here. What matters is what the local courts see. She leaned forward, her eyes glittering with a cold fire he'd never seen before. Kevin and I have looked into it. We had a consultation with an attorney, and the consensus is clear. She paused for effect, letting the words hang in the air between them. He owns nothing here, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, echoing the words he imagined she and her brother had shared. We checked. He didn't know then that she was quoting her future legal strategy. He thought it was just cruelty, a final, vicious attempt to render him powerless. He didn't argue. He just stood up, cleared his plate, and walked out of the room. The facade of their marriage had crumbled, leaving behind only the ugly scaffolding of greed and contempt. What she didn't know was that the piece of paper she so casually dismissed was not just a document. It was a fortress, and she had just declared war on it. The rain had intensified, drumming a frantic, relentless rhythm on the roof of the bungalow. It was 11:18 p.m. The house was cold, the thermostat likely turned down by Janelle before she'd left for her glamorous evening in Ballantine, a small, thoughtless act of cost-saving that felt like a profound insult in that moment. Marcus sat motionless, the laptop screen casting long, dancing shadows across the living room. The room itself, once a source of comfort, now felt like a crime scene. The $800 sofa they had picked out together, the one where he'd held her and dreamed of their future, seemed to mock him. He clicked again, scrolling through the PDF of the seizure motion. His eyes, accustomed to spotting the tiniest imperfections in a car's paint job, now scanned the legal document with a mechanic's focus, searching for the flaw, the mistake, the point of failure. The language was dense, filled with boilerplate phrases and legal jargon clearly supplied by the attorney Janelle had consulted. But the core of it was her sworn statement, a narrative of lies so audacious it was almost breathtaking. I, Janelle Harris, being of sound mind, do hereby attest that the following assets were acquired primarily through my own financial means and professional efforts, he read aloud, his voice a hoarse whisper in the silent room. He could almost hear her saying it, her voice laced with the practiced confidence she'd acquired in her new corporate world. The statement went on to detail her career growth, her salary increases, her networking. It painted a picture of a dynamic, ambitious woman shackled to a stagnant, unambitious man. It positioned him as a passenger in his own life. The document listed the $220,000 bungalow on Westmoreland Avenue. It didn't mention that it had been purchased mortgage-free in 2018 with funds directly from the William Harris Revocable Trust. It listed the $50,000 Toyota 4Runner. It didn't mention the cashier's check used to buy it, a check drawn from the same trust account. It listed the $70,341 in savings. It failed to mention the initial $50,000 deposit had been a direct transfer from the trust upon his father's passing, with only the remaining $20,000 being a mix of their combined savings over 3 years. The most galling part was the deliberate, strategic omission of his name from the ownership fields. The form had a space for registered owners. Janelle, or her lawyer, had typed only Janelle Harris. It was a lie of such profound simplicity and devastating impact. By erasing his name from the initial claim, they were framing the legal battle before it even began. It forced him into the position of having to prove his ownership, rather than her having to prove his lack of it. It was a classic legal maneuver. Strike first, define the narrative, and put the opponent on the defensive. A wave of something colder than anger washed over him. It was a feeling of profound vulnerability, The kind a person feels when they realize the locks on their doors were only ever for show. The rain was a torrent now, and in the distance a flash of lightning briefly illuminated the dark street, the skeletal branches of the oak tree in the front yard. The light caught the framed photo on the mantelpiece, Marcus and his father, standing proudly in front of the old Harris Automotive sign, their arms around each other. His father's face, full of warmth and wisdom, seemed to look at him with knowing eyes. "Never let anyone make you feel small," his father's voice echoed in his memory. Marcus closed the laptop. The screen went black, and his own reflection stared back at him, a tired, heartbroken man. But underneath the shock, something else was beginning to form, a cold, hard resolve. Janelle and her brother had made a critical mistake. They had researched North Carolina marital property law. They had consulted an attorney about deeds and titles. They had checked everything they could see. But they hadn't checked the one thing they couldn't see: the foundation. They had built their entire case on a structure whose real ownership was buried in a vault, documented in a trust they had dismissed as just a piece of paper. They thought they were taking his house. They had no idea they were trespassing on his father's legacy, and for that, there would be a reckoning. The next morning, the world felt unnervingly normal. The sun was out, casting a clean, bright light over the rain-washed street. The air smelled of wet earth and asphalt. Marcus woke up at 5:30 a.m., his usual time after a night of fitful, dreamless sleep. The other side of the bed was cold. Janelle hadn't come home. A text message from her sent at 2:14 a.m. was waiting on his phone. "Sorry, had too much wine at Ashley's, crashing on her couch. See you tomorrow night." Ashley was a friend from her work. It was a plausible lie, but he knew it was a lie nonetheless. She was likely at her brother's, planning the next phase of their attack. He made his coffee, the familiar ritual, a small, steadying anchor in a sea of chaos. He had to go to work. He had to act as if nothing had happened. This was the hardest part. Every instinct screamed at him to call her, to confront her, to unleash the torrent of rage and hurt that was building inside him. But his father's voice was there again, a calm presence in the storm of his thoughts. "Don't get mad, son. Get smart. The angrier you get, the stupider you get." He knew with a chilling certainty that any confrontation would be a mistake. She and Kevin were expecting it. They would be prepared with deflections, justifications, and more lies. They would use his anger against him, paint him as unstable, and record the conversation to use as evidence. No. The only path forward was silence, strategic restraint. He had to play dumb. That evening, Janelle came home around 7 p.m. She walked in carrying a designer shopping bag from Nordstrom, a $450 purchase that felt like a slap in the face. She was wearing a new silk blouse that probably cost more than his weekly grocery budget. She smiled at him, a bright, brittle thing that didn't reach her eyes. "Hey, you," she said, pecking him on the cheek. Her perfume, a $180 bottle of Chanel No. 5, enveloped him. "Sorry about last night. Ashley and I got to talking and we lost track of time." "No problem," Marcus said, his voice even. He was at the kitchen counter wiping it down. "Rough day at work?" He forced himself to ask the question, to play the part of the concerned husband. The lie felt like ash in his mouth. "The usual," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "Meetings, spreadsheets. Kevin thinks I'm on track for a promotion." She beamed, a genuine smile this time, reserved for the topic of her own success. "We might finally be able to get out of this place." He just nodded, turning back to the counter. He could feel her eyes on him, probably gauging his reaction, searching for any sign of suspicion. He gave her none. He was a blank wall. Inside, he was replaying the words from her affidavit, the casual cruelty of her phone call. He was dying inside, but his face was a mask of placid normalcy. A few days later, he manufactured an opportunity. He knew Janelle and Kevin spoke every evening, usually around 8 p.m., to strategize. He told Janelle he needed to run to AutoZone to pick up a specific part for a side project, a $30 sensor for a neighbor's old Honda. As he left, he discreetly turned on the voice recorder app on his old smartphone, a $150 Samsung, and left it under a cushion on the sofa. It was a desperate move, possibly illegal. But he felt he had no other choice. He needed to know what he was up against. He drove to the AutoZone on Wilkinson Boulevard, bought the part, and drove back, taking the long way, his hands gripping the steering wheel of the very 4Runner she was trying to steal. When he returned 40 minutes later, the house was quiet. Janelle was in the shower. He retrieved the phone, his heart hammering. He went into his small workshop in the garage, a space that was entirely his, filled with his father's old tools, and put in his headphones. He fast-forwarded through the silence until he heard her voice. "Is he gone?" It was Janelle. "Yeah, he went to the store," Kevin replied. His voice was tinny over the speaker. "Good. Did you get the mail?" "Yes, I got it. Nothing yet from the court. The lawyer said it could take a week or two for the service processor to officially notify him." A pause. Then Kevin's voice, sharp and urgent. "You have to keep it together, Janelle. No slipping up. You have to act like you love him until the papers are served. We need him compliant. We can't have him getting spooked and trying to hide assets." "Hide what assets?" Janelle scoffed. "A collection of old wrenches? The man has nothing. We've been over this. The house, the car, the bank account, they're all vulnerable. The lawyer was very clear. Because your name is on the deed, the presumption of marital property is strong. His trust story won't hold up. It's hearsay. There's no paper trail linking that trust directly to these specific assets in a way that a North Carolina court will recognize." Marcus felt a grim smile touch his lips. There's no paper trail? They had made another assumption. A fatal one. Kevin continued. "Exactly. So just play the loving wife. Talk about the future. Tell him you're proud of him. Whatever bullshit you have to say. Just for a little while longer. Once the seizure is approved and the assets are frozen under your control, you can drop the act. We'll have all the leverage. He'll have to settle for pennies, if that. He'll walk away with his toolbox and his $60,000 a year job, and we'll walk away with the keys to our new life." I know, Janelle said, her voice tired. "It just feels dirty sometimes." "It's not dirty," Kevin snapped. "It's smart. It's business. He held you back for years. This is you finally getting what you deserve. Don't go soft on me now." Marcus stopped the recording. He sat in the silence of the garage, the smell of oil and metal a comforting familiarity. He felt no anger now, just a profound, chilling clarity. They had laid out their entire plan, their entire philosophy, their utter lack of morality, and they had confirmed his path forward. They thought he was playing checkers. They had no idea he was about to checkmate the king. The next morning, Marcus called in sick to work for the first time in 5 years. He told his supervisor he had a stomach bug, a simple, unverifiable excuse. At 9 a.m., he was sitting in the plush, intimidatingly quiet waiting room of a law firm in uptown Charlotte. The firm, Adebayo and Associates, had been recommended by a trusted old friend of his father's. "She's expensive, but she's a shark and she's honest," the friend had said. A few minutes later, he was shown into a corner office with a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city. The glass tower made him feel small, a deliberate effect, he suspected. Behind a large mahogany desk sat Funka Adebayo. She was a tall, elegant black woman in her late 40s, wearing a sharp, tailored suit that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage payment used to. Her hair was styled in immaculate locks, adorned with a few silver beads that caught the light. She regarded him with intelligent, unsmiling eyes. "Mr. Harris," she said, her voice a deep, resonant alto, "thank you for coming in. My assistant said it was urgent." Marcus sat, placing a worn leather satchel on his lap. It was his father's. "It is," he said. "My wife is trying to take everything from me." Ms. Adebayo listened without interruption for 20 minutes as Marcus laid out the entire story, his voice calm and measured. He told her about Janelle, her brother, the court filing, the calculated erasure of his name, and the conversation he had recorded. When he finished, he reached into the satchel. "She said there was no paper trail," Marcus said, pulling out a thick, leather-bound portfolio. She was wrong. He opened the portfolio on the polished surface of her desk. Inside, meticulously organized in plastic sleeves, was every document pertaining to the William Harris Revocable Trust. It was all there. The trust's founding documents, signed and notarized. The schedule of assets, which listed his father's original properties and bank accounts. And the critical documents, the deed transfer record, showing the Westmoreland bungalow being moved from his father's personal name into the trust in 2015. The bill of sale for the Toyota 4Runner, paid for with a cashier's check from the William Harris Trust account at Bank of America. The bank statements showing the initial $50,000 transfer from that same trust account into the new joint savings account he'd opened with Janelle. And finally, the most important document of all, the page that named Marcus William Harris as the sole, irrevocable beneficiary of the trust upon his father's death. Ms. Adebayo picked up the documents one by one, her expression unreadable. She spent several minutes reading, her eyes scanning the legal text with an expert's speed. The silence in the room was absolute. Finally, she laid the last page down and looked up at Marcus. A slow, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "Mr. Harris," she said, and for the first time her voice held a note of warmth, of admiration. "Your father was a very, very smart man." She leaned back in her chair. "Your wife and her brother are amateurs. They're playing a local game looking at North Carolina marital property law. What they failed to understand is that these assets were never truly marital property to begin with. They belong to a legal entity, the trust. You are not the owner, you are the beneficiary. The trust is the owner." She tapped the deed transfer record. "When your father put this house into the trust, he protected it. When you added Janelle's name to the deed, you gave her the appearance of ownership, which is what her lawyer is banking on. But the trust's prior claim supersedes hers. She is, in legal terms, a non-entitled party to an asset owned by a separate legal entity." "So what does that mean?" Marcus asked. "It means her seizure motion is built on a foundation of sand," Ms. Adebayo said, her eyes gleaming. "It's fraudulent. She has sworn in an affidavit that she acquired these assets, which is demonstrably false. We will not be filing a response to her motion. That would be playing her game. We are going to circumvent it entirely." She outlined the plan. It was simple, elegant, and devastating. The trustee of his father's trust, a retired bank manager and lifelong family friend named Mr. Henderson, would, on behalf of the trust, issue a formal letter. The letter would be addressed to Janelle, her attorney, and the clerk of court. It would state that the assets listed in her motion were the sole property of the William Harris Revocable Trust, that her claim was invalid, and that any attempt to seize or liquidate them would be met with a lawsuit for damages against both her and her attorney for filing a frivolous and fraudulent claim. This letter, Ms. Adebayo explained, effectively voids her entire legal action. It removes the assets from the court's jurisdiction. They revert to the control of the trust, and by extension, you, the beneficiary. She will be left with nothing but her own legal bills and a potential sanction from the bar for her attorney. Marcus felt a wave of relief so profound It almost made him dizzy. "How much will this cost?" he asked. "My retainer is $5,000, she said, "and my hourly rate is $600. But I have a feeling this won't take very many hours at all. Let's get Mr. Henderson on the phone." The plan was in motion. The trap was set. The strike was scheduled for Friday at 1:15 p.m. The timing was Ms. Adebayo's idea, born from a piece of intelligence Marcus had provided. Every Friday, Janelle and Kevin had a celebratory strategy lunch at a trendy, expensive restaurant in Ballantyne. They saw it as a victory lap, a toast to their own cleverness. This week, they had chosen La Belle Hélène, a classic French brasserie known for its power lunch crowd. Ms. Adebayo wanted the delivery of their defeat to be a public performance. At 1:10 p.m., Janelle and Kevin were seated at a prime table near the front window. The restaurant was bustling, filled with the hum of conversations about mergers, acquisitions, and stock options. Janelle felt a thrill of belonging. She was wearing a new $800 dress she'd bought for the occasion. Kevin was leaning back in his chair looking smug. They had just ordered a $90 bottle of Sancerre. "To new beginnings," Kevin said, raising his glass, "and to leaving the dead weight behind." Janelle clinked her glass against his. A sliver of guilt pricked at her, but she pushed it down. This was for the best. Marcus was holding her back. He was content with his simple life, his greasy hands, his small world. She was destined for more. "To our new life," she agreed, taking a sip of the crisp, cold wine. "The lawyer called this morning," Kevin said, lowering his voice. "The server is scheduled to deliver the papers to Marcus at the house this evening. Once he's served, the clock starts ticking. He'll have 30 days to respond, but what can he do? He can't afford a lawyer who can fight this." "And even if he could," Janelle added, repeating the lines they had rehearsed, "the facts are on our side. My name is on everything. Possession is 9/10 of the law." She smiled, feeling the warmth of the wine and the thrill of her impending victory. She imagined her future. A sleek condo in South End, a new social circle, a life untethered from the man she'd come to see as a symbol of her own past failures. At that exact moment, 1:15 p.m., a man in a nondescript gray suit walked into the restaurant. He was a professional process server, a man paid to be unnoticeable until the moment of impact. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on their table. He approached with a calm, deliberate pace. "Janelle Harris?" he asked, his voice polite but firm. Janelle looked up, startled. "Yes?" "This is for you," he said, placing a crisp, white, legal-sized envelope on the table next to her plate of half-eaten bread and $18 butter. He didn't wait for a reply. He simply turned and walked out of the restaurant. Kevin frowned. "What was that?" "I don't know," Janelle said, her heart suddenly beating faster. It was too early for a response from Marcus. He hadn't even been served yet. With trembling fingers, she picked up the envelope. It was addressed to her, with copies noted to Kevin Miller, Fletcher and Sons Legal, and the Mecklenburg County Clerk of Court. Her hands felt cold. She tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of heavy cream-colored paper, bearing the letterhead of the William Harris Revocable Trust. She began to read. The language was cold, precise, and utterly brutal. It stated that the trust was the sole and legal owner of the property at 1412 Westmoreland Avenue, the 2021 Toyota 4Runner, and the foundational funds within the Truist savings account. It cited the original deed transfers and bills of sale, copies of which, it noted, were attached for her convenience. It went on to state that her seizure motion, case number 24-CVD-1889, was based on a fraudulent misrepresentation of ownership. It declared her claim null and void. The letter concluded with a chilling paragraph. Be advised that as of the receipt of this notice, all assets listed are under the exclusive control of the trust. Any further action taken by you or your legal counsel to seize, freeze, or otherwise interfere with these assets will be considered tortious interference with trust property. The trust will pursue all available legal remedies, including a suit for monetary damages against you personally and a formal complaint of professional misconduct against your counsel. All parties are hereby instructed to cease and desist all actions related to this matter immediately. Janelle's face went white. The color drained from her cheeks as if a plug had been pulled. The letter trembled in her hand. She looked at Kevin, her eyes wide with panic and disbelief. "What is it?" he snapped, snatching the letter from her. He read it quickly, his own smug expression dissolving into a mask of horror. He flipped through the attached documents, the copies of the deeds, the cashier's check, the trust beneficiary page with Marcus's name in bold print, the paper trail, the one they were so sure didn't exist. This can't be right," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. The entire restaurant seemed to fade away. The hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses. It was all just white noise. "What does it mean, Kevin?" Janelle asked, her voice shaking. Kevin looked at her, his face pale, his eyes full of a dawning, sickening realization. The finance genius, the master strategist, was utterly defeated. "It means," he said, the words catching in his throat, "that he owns everything, and we own nothing." The waiter arrived with their main courses, a $42 steak frites for Kevin and a $38 coq au vin for Janelle. The plates landed on the table with a soft clatter, the aroma of the rich food suddenly nauseating. They just stared at the letter, at the ruins of their brilliant plan, the public humiliation washing over them in waves. Their victory lunch had just become a funeral. The consequences cascaded with the cold, impersonal finality of a court order. The downfall was not a single dramatic event, but a series of quiet, devastating collapses. The first domino to fall was the legal one. The following Monday, Janelle received a call from her attorney at Fletcher & Sons Legal. The tone was no longer collaborative and encouraging. It was panicked and accusatory. He had received his copy of the trustee's letter. "You swore in an affidavit that these were your assets, Janelle," he said, his voice tight with fury. "You told me his trust story was just talk. You've exposed me to a misconduct complaint and my firm to a lawsuit." He informed her that he was immediately filing a motion to withdraw as her counsel and dropping her as a client. The final bill for his services, for filing a single fraudulent motion, was $3,800, due immediately. The second consequence was financial. Her seizure motion was dismissed with prejudice by the court a week later, meaning she could never file it again. The $340,341 in assets were secure, completely and utterly beyond her reach. Suddenly, her own financial picture came into sharp, terrifying focus. Her $75,000 salary was impressive, but it supported a lifestyle of debt. Her credit card statements arrived like judgments, a balance of $8,200 on her American Express, filled with charges for the $800 dress, the $180 perfume, and dozens of $150 dinners in Ballantyne. Her car payment on her own modest sedan was $450 a month. Without access to the savings account or the equity in the house, she was insolvent. The third was the loss of her home. 2 weeks after the disastrous lunch, a formal eviction notice arrived, delivered by the same impassive process server. It was from the trust, legally evicting her from the property on Westmoreland Avenue. She had 30 days to vacate. The house she had called a starter home with such disdain was now a paradise she was being exiled from. The fourth consequence was social and familial. The relationship with her brother fractured under the weight of their failure. He blamed her for being soft and for not knowing about the trust. She blamed him for his arrogant, terrible advice that had led her to ruin. Their shared dream of a South End condo evaporated, replaced by the grim reality of her moving into the spare bedroom of his cramped, $1,500 a month apartment in a generic complex off I-77. The finance genius who was supposed to lead them to riches now had a roommate he couldn't afford to get rid of. During this time, Marcus's phone began to light up with a series of frantic messages from Janelle. He never answered. He let them go to voicemail, each one a small, pathetic monument to her unraveling. Ms. Adebayo had advised him to save them. They were a record of her state of mind. The first voicemail left the Friday night of the lunch. Marcus, pick up the phone. I just got this insane letter. It's some kind of mistake. Your father's trust? What is this? This is crazy. Call me back. We need to talk. Her voice was confused, angry. The second left Saturday morning. Okay, I spoke to Kevin. Clearly, this is some kind of scare tactic. It's not legal. You can't just cut me out of marital property. That's not how it works, Marcus. This is low, even for you. You need to call off your lawyer or whatever this is right now. Denial, mixed with threats. The third left Monday evening after her lawyer fired her. Marcus, please call me. I think I made a mistake. Kevin, he pushed me into this. I didn't understand. I never wanted to hurt you. I got bad advice. We can fix this, right? We can just go back to how things were? The pleading began. The fourth, a week later, was just sobbing. A long, 30-second message of incoherent crying, the sound of a world completely falling apart. The final voicemail came the day she moved out. Her voice was hollow, defeated. I'm at the house. I'm packing my things. I left your father's picture on the mantel. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I'm so sorry. I destroyed everything. Marcus listened to them once, then saved the audio files to a secure folder on his laptop, labeled simply, Evidence. He felt no triumph, no joy, just a profound, empty sadness for the woman he had once loved and the man she had forced him to become. The quiet, devastating lines of her collapse were a testament not to his victory, but to her own choices. He had simply held up a mirror, and she had shattered against her own reflection. 1 year later, the west side of Charlotte was blooming. The garden in the small yard of the bungalow on Westmoreland Avenue was thriving under a warm May sun. Marcus had expanded it, and now rows of vibrant green tomato plants, staked with care, stood alongside peppers, cucumbers, and herbs. The act of tending the soil, of nurturing life from nothing, had been a balm to his soul. The house, once a silent monument to betrayal, was now his sanctuary, filled with the comfortable quiet of solitude and the faint, ever-present smell of his father's old books and the lemon oil he used to polish the wood floors. The greatest change, however, was not in the garden, but a few miles away, in an old brick building on a commercial strip that had seen better days. The faded sign that had once read Harris Automotive was gone, replaced by a new, freshly painted one. Harris & Son Automotive. Using a carefully planned $40,000 loan from the trust, a loan he was paying back to himself with interest, Marcus had leased his father's old garage. He'd spent months cleaning it out, servicing the old lifts, and investing in modern diagnostic equipment. He opened for business 6 months ago. He was the owner, the manager, and the lead mechanic. He hired 2 young guys from the neighborhood, teaching them the trade just as his father had taught him. He wasn't getting rich. His income was still modest, probably around $70,000 a year now. But it was his. Every dollar was earned through his own skill, his own integrity. The work was hard, the hours long, but the satisfaction was immense. His deep brown skin still got smudged with grease, but now it was the grease of his own enterprise, the grime of his own legacy. His clients were his neighbors, people who trusted him not just with their cars, but with their safety. He charged fair prices, did honest work, and his reputation grew. One afternoon, while closing up the shop, he saw a familiar figure standing across the street watching him. It was Janelle. She looked smaller, diminished. Her clothes were simple, a plain dress that was clean but inexpensive. The designer labels were gone. He learned through the grapevine that she was working as a paralegal at a small firm, making about $50,000 a year and still living with her brother. He felt a brief pang of something, not pity, but a kind of sorrow for what could have been. He finished locking the bay door and walked across the street. She flinched when he approached, as if expecting anger. "Janelle?" he said, his voice neutral. "Marcus," she whispered. "The shop. It looks just like his." "I'm trying," he said simply. Tears welled in her eyes. "I know sorry isn't enough. I know it will never be enough, but I am. I was wrong. I was greedy and foolish, and I listened to the wrong people. I threw away the only real thing I ever had for nothing." Marcus looked at her, at the woman who had tried to erase him, and he felt nothing. The anger was gone. The hurt had faded into a scar. He had moved on. He had rebuilt. He had forgiven her, not for her sake, but for his. Forgiving her was the final act of setting himself free. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Janelle," he said, and the words were not unkind. He turned and walked back to his 4Runner, the one she had tried to steal, its engine turning over with a reliable hum. He drove home to his quiet bungalow, to the peace he had earned. True wealth, he had learned, isn't measured by the numbers in a bank account or the square footage of a house. It's not found in glass towers or expensive dresses. True wealth is the legacy you inherit and the one you build. It's the trust of your community. It's the satisfaction of honest work done with your own 2 hands. It's the quiet strength to stand firm on the foundation your ancestors built for you, and the wisdom to know that character, not cash, is the only asset that can never be seized. We all face moments that test our character. What does true wealth mean to you? Share your thoughts in the comments, and remember to subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories of justice, resilience, and the quiet triumph of the human spirit.